I'm Lorilee Wiesner, and I live in Quebec City on the South Shore. We've been there for 11 years. I grew up in West Africa, was born in the country of Côte d'Ivoire, and lived there till the age of 12. And at the age of 12, my parents accepted to come to Quebec with the Christian Missionary Alliance. That was a major transition in our life, very hard. I had a very happy upbringing in Africa, really enjoyed being an MK, enjoyed living there, the heat, the humidity, the food, the relationships that we had with other missionaries and missionary kids. And so when we came to Quebec and had to sort of relearn to live as just a family and not to be gone to boarding school, that was a major transition. That took us a few years to figure that out as a family. It's interesting that I ended up in Quebec because as I went through my teenage years and accepted, felt God's call in my heart to missions, in the back of my mind it was, yes, Lord, anywhere, but I didn't want to end it back up in Quebec because my teenage years there had been quite lonely. Having grown up in Africa with a close-knit missionary family and then coming to Quebec, I just didn't have very many Christian friends. I had some good friends at high school, but didn't feel that same bond with them because they weren't brothers or sisters in Christ. And so I didn't really ever think that I would go back to Quebec. And then we started doing youth ministry in Burlington after Troy was finished seminary. And at that time would come back. My parents were still living in Quebec at that time. Still are, actually. And we would come back to visit them. And when we would come back to visit them, we started to develop a burden. God started putting a burden in our hearts for the teenagers there. We would look at the teens in our youth group and think of maybe 5 or 6 other churches that we would pass on the way to get to our church, where there were great youth groups that those kids could participate in and be fed and be encouraged in their faith, and that were reaching out into the community as well. And when we would come to Quebec, we would see that there was nothing there. There was no youth program. The few youth that were in the church, they maybe had Sunday school and sometimes some sort of haphazard organization of activities here and there, but nothing major. And so at that point, God was birthing that burden in us. And at the same time, the St. Lawrence District began to think about their needs for youth ministry in the province. And so those things came together just kind of in God's timing, and that was back 11 years ago. We moved to Quebec. The history of a strong Catholic Church in Quebec that had a lot to say in the everyday functioning of people's lives, and then through the Quiet Revolution in the 1960s, where people left the Catholic Church in large numbers, and I think at that same time didn't say no to God or spiritual life, but said no in a sense to organized religion. And so any church is seen perhaps through that lens. And so people are culturally Catholic, culturally Christian, but do not necessarily, are not interested in really pursuing a relationship with God, but very spiritually minded at the same time. So that you'll find a lot of New Age, a lot of interest in spirituality, but not necessarily something that's organized. And so I think that's a barrier that the church has to overcome, to be seen in that same light or to be seen as a cult. So people could pray for that, for that kind of bondage to be broken in people's lives, so that they would be open, that Christians would be able to form those relationships with people and show them Jesus Christ in a pertinent, personal way, not in a, you have to go to church to have a relationship with Christ, but that you need to have a relationship with Christ, apart from the organized religion part of it. One thing that we've seen in our time there that bothers us a great deal, and perhaps it's seen in Canada in general, but even more pronounced in Quebec, is that as kids come up through the church, born into Christian families, raised in Christian homes, and then around the age of between 17 and 19, after they leave high school, often reject Christ at that point in their lives. So to pray for young adults who are faced with so many choices and different things that would speak into their lives that would try to distract them and pull them away from God, that the church in general would know how to respond to those young adults to help them find their place in the church, and just spiritual protection for kids who've grown up in the church. I think just in we work in the Quebec City area, and we've been working with 3 churches. Two of the churches average less than 100 people in attendance, and one of the churches are around 150. And in the 10 years that we have been there, we know of at least 70 kids that we can name who have left the church. And so that's significant when you think of how small the churches are. I really enjoy being able to be in 2 cultures and to see my kids learn French. That's just great. I love that they are sort of in the middle, and I think that expands their worldview and helps them see beyond themselves, and helps them understand that not everybody is exactly like them. So that's a real joy. And some of the awesome opportunities in Quebec, just in terms of the beauty of the province, there's just wonderful places to visit as a family, great things to do that in Quebec City that are just so fun. And so we love that aspect of it. I think because the churches are smaller, it requires us as parents to be, I think all parents need to be this. I just feel it even more so being in Quebec, that we don't have a great extended Christian family or programming around our children that helps reinforce what we do in our home. So that requires us to be even more vigilant as mom and dad, to be speaking into our lives, our children's lives spiritually. So I think that's probably our greatest challenge. We feel there's a lot that would be pulling away from the values that we would be trying to teach them in our family, and not much that's helping reinforce that.